the dense, ancient forest with its gnarled trees reaching skyward like skeletal fingers. Emily had always been drawn to places like this, finding a strange comfort in their foreboding darkness. That was precisely why she had ventured into the heart of the Pacific Northwest forest alone. She had prepared in advance for this journey, packing food, water, and a GPS device to ensure she'd never get lost. Sarah was an experienced hiker, confident in her abilities to navigate even the most treacherous terrain. The forest was her playground, or so she thought. With a sense of purpose, she ventured deeper into the woods as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of fiery orange and deep purple. The forest began to take on an otherworldly quality. The ancient trees seemed to whisper secrets to one another in the gathering darkness. Time moved swiftly, and before she knew it, the forest canopy above was veiled in darkness. Emily turned on her flashlight, the beam cutting a thin path through the inky blackness ahead. The only sounds were her heavy breathing and the rustling leaves beneath her boots. Suddenly her GPS device, her lifeline to civilization, displayed the dreaded, "no signal" message. Panic surged within her, but she tried to quell it. Maybe it was just a glitch, she thought. She clicked the device off and on, but the result was the same. She was lost in these woods alone. The sky became dark fast, and it felt like the forest seemed to close in around her. The feeling of being watched, of unseen eyes peering at her from the shadows, intensified. The once comforting forest now felt hostile and alien. She quickened her pace, desperate to find her way out. Hours passed, and with every step, the forest twisted and shifted, its layout defying all logic. It was as if the trees themselves conspired against her, moving silently to obstruct her path. The distant sounds of howling wolves sent shivers down her spine, and she tried to reassure herself that they were far away. She was not alone out here, and maybe that was her mind finding comfort. Then Sarah heard something that froze her in her tracks, a soft, ethereal laughter, like the tinkling of a distant bell. It was a sound that didn't belong in the forest, and it was just beyond her line of sight. She called out, "Hello? Is someone there?" No response. Only the laughter continued, now growing louder and more unsettling. She couldn't tell if it was the wind or some unknown entity playing tricks on her. Her heart pounded in her chest as she inched forward, flashlight trembling in her hand. As she moved further into the forest, the laughter seemed to surround her, as if it was emanating from the very trees themselves. Panic welled up inside her, and she felt her sanity slipping. She tried to retrace her steps, but every direction seemed to lead her further into the heart of the disorienting forest. In the pitch-black night, she stumbled over tree roots and underbrush, her breath coming in ragged gasps. The laughter continued to echo around her, mingling with strange, indecipherable whispers. "Hello?" she cried out, her voice breaking. Then she heard it, a voice, soft and haunting, almost a mere whisper on the wind. "Come closer," it beckoned. The voice was eerily enticing, pulling at her like a siren's call. Emily was compelled to follow, even though she knew she shouldn't. She ventured deeper into the forest, guided by that beguiling voice. Each step felt like a descent into a surreal nightmare. The trees, illuminated by the trembling beam of her flashlight, took on grotesque shapes, their branches resembling twisted, gnarled hands. Her sense of time and direction had become utterly skewed. How long had she been wandering in this surreal realm? Hours? Days? It was impossible to tell. She was no longer certain if she was even on Earth. Exhausted and on the brink of despair, Emily finally stopped. She couldn't continue blindly following that voice, the source of which remained out of reach. Trembling, she shouted into the abyss. "Who are you? What do you want from me?" The forest fell silent, the laughter and whispers disappearing as abruptly as they had come. In the profound stillness, Emily realized she was truly alone. With trembling hands, she retrieved her now useless GPS device and turned it on again, but the screen remained blank. Despair settled in as the reality of her situation sank in. She was lost in a forest that defied of all sense and reason. In the suffocating darkness, she slumped to the ground, her flashlight flickering and dying. She was enveloped by the disorienting forest, a place where the boundaries between reality and the supernatural had blurred, and the fear of what lay hidden in its depths was more horrifying than any nightmare she could have imagined. There, in that unfathomable darkness, Emily awaited the dawn, praying that it would bring with it a way out of this haunted forest and an end to the eerie laughter and whispers that lingered in her ears. The moon hung low in the night sky, casting an eerie glow over the desolate landscape. Within this landscape stood an old, decrepit asylum, a place where the mentally ill had once been confined and forgotten. Its cracked windows stared out like blind eyes, and the shattered doors creaked in the wind. A group of adventurous friends, fueled by youthful curiosity, had gathered to explore the forsaken building. As they approached the asylum, a sense of foreboding washed over them. It was as if the building itself recoiled at their intrusion. They exchanged nervous glances but pressed on. Amy, the leader of the group, flashed a mischievous grin as she jiggled the rusted doorknob. With a groan, the door reluctantly swung open, revealing a pitch-black void within. "Are we really going in there?" Mark asked, his voice quivering. Amy, the boldest of the group, assured them. "Come on, guys, it's just a spooky old building. What's the worst that can happen?" They entered, their footsteps echoing through the long, narrow hallways. The asylum was a maze of crumbling walls and peeling wallpaper, its silence disturbed only by the sound of their own breathing. Dust motes danced in the moonlight that filtered through shattered windows. As they ventured deeper, they began to hear strange sounds. Faint whispers, like distant conversations carried by the wind, filled the air. No one admitted it aloud, but they were all growing increasingly uneasy. "It's just the wind," Amy muttered, trying to convince herself. "Let's stick together." They explored room after room, finding dilapidated beds, decaying furniture, and straitjackets hanging from rusty hooks on the walls. The asylum's history was becoming more apparent, a place of pain and suffering, where the mentally ill had been subjected to outdated and cruel treatments. As they continued their exploration, Mark suddenly stopped in his tracks. "Did you guys hear that?" he asked, his face pale. "What?" Amy asked, turning towards him. It sounded like a child crying. Mark whispered, his voice trembling. The group fell silent, straining their ears. Sure enough, a faint, mournful cry, like that of a lost child, echoed through the hallways. It sent shivers down their spines. "I think we should leave," Sarah, the most timid of the group, urged. But Amy was determined to press on. "We've come this far. We can't chicken out now." They moved toward the sound, and it led them to a small, dimly lit room at the end of a corridor. In the corner, they saw a tattered ancient doll, its button eyes seeming to fixate on them. "That's creepy," John muttered. The cries grew louder, and it became apparent that they emanated from the doll itself. Its porcelain mouth opened and closed, producing a sound both heartbreaking and spine-chilling. "Oh my gosh! What is going on?" Mark exclaimed, his voice tinged with panic. They watched in horror as the doll's head began to turn, the grinding of porcelain on porcelain filling the room. Its lifeless eyes locked onto them, and it spoke in a soft, childlike voice. "Play with me." They stumbled back, terror gripping their hearts, as the doll moved toward them, inch by inch, its tiny porcelain limbs contorting unnaturally. The room seemed to close in around them as they fumbled for the exit. Bursting back into the hallway, they sprinted through the asylum's dark passages, their breaths ragged, and their hearts pounding in their chests. The asylum itself seemed to come alive, its walls whispering secrets, and the distant sound of agonized wails filling the air. Finally, they burst through the front door, collapsing onto the overgrown lawn, gasping for air. The asylum loomed behind them, its windows aglow with an unnatural, ethereal light. It was as if the building itself had been waiting for their departure. As they retreated, they could still hear the doll's cry echoing through the night, fading into the distance. In hushed, fearful tones, they vowed never to return to that accursed place. The abandoned asylum remained, a crumbling monument to a dark past, its secrets and horrors hidden within its dilapidated walls. And as for the group of friends who dared to enter its haunted halls, the memories of that night would forever haunt their dreams, a chilling reminder that some places should remain undisturbed, their terrors left to slumber in the depths of the past. The desert stretched endlessly in all directions, a vast, unforgiving expanse of sand and rock. A lone car plowed through the desolation, its tires kicking up plumes of dust in the scorching afternoon sun. Inside, Sarah and David were on a cross-country road trip, seeking adventure and a connection with the untamed wilderness of the Arizona desert. The desolation was both breathtaking and intimidating, but the couple was enthralled by the beauty of the arid landscape. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of crimson and amber, they took a fateful turn onto a remote dirt road. They had no idea it would lead them into a nightmarish ordeal. The road twisted and turned, and soon, the last traces of civilization disappeared. They were alone, surrounded by an unrelenting desert. The car's GPS signal blinked out, leaving them stranded with no cell phone reception. Panic began to gnaw at their nerves. Sarah tried to remain calm. "It's probably just a glitch in the GPS. Let's turn back." But when they attempted to retrace their path, they found that the desert landscape was eerily consistent. Endless dunes, barren and unforgiving. Their tire tracks seemed to disappear into the vast sea of sand. Their sense of direction was as elusive as a mirage. With nightfall approaching and the temperature plummeting, they realized they had no choice but to wait until morning to navigate their way out. They bundled up in the car, trying to ward off the cold, and waited in uneasy silence. Hours passed, and the desert became a haunting, desolate place under the moonlight. It was then that they heard something, a soft, haunting melody carried on the wind. Sarah and David exchanged bewildered glances. "What is that?" David asked, peering into the darkness. "I have no idea," Sarah replied, her voice trembling. "It sounds like music, but there's no one around for miles." The haunting tune grew louder, and they realized it was coming from the dunes. With a mixture of curiosity and dread, they decided to investigate. Armed with flashlights, they ventured into the moonlit desert, following the eerie melody. As they drew closer to the source, the landscape began to change. Strange rock formations and twisted desert plants loomed like grotesque sentinels. The melody led them to a surreal sight, an old, ornate piano half buried in the sand. It stood alone in the moonlight, as if beckoning to them. Who would leave a piano in the middle of the desert? David mused, awestruck and wary. Sarah reached out to touch the instrument, and as her fingers brushed the keys, the piano came to life. The haunting melody swelled, filling the night air. The sound was otherworldly, beautiful yet unsettling, like a siren's song. They stood there, mesmerized by the music, when the desert around them seemed to shift. The dunes moved, as if alive, and the landscape transformed before their eyes. The piano was no longer half buried, but standing in the heart of a grand, forgotten concert hall, adorned with crimson velvet curtains and golden chandeliers. Intrigued and bewildered, they stepped inside the hall, the haunting melody drawing them deeper into its depths. They couldn't resist the allure, and they found themselves dancing to the haunting tune, swept away by its enchantment. As the night wore on, they lost track of time and reality. They danced, twirled, and waltzed, surrounded by an audience of shadowy figures in the opulent, ghostly hall. The haunting music wrapped around them like a silk cocoon, and they were lost in its spell. But as the first light of dawn broke over the horizon, the desert began to reclaim its reality. The grand concert hall faded, and the ornate piano vanished into the sand. Sarah and David found themselves alone, disoriented and fatigued, as if they had just woken from a dream. They stumbled back to their car, their memories of the strange encounter already slipping away like a fading mirage. As the engine roared to life, they realized that their sense of direction had returned. They followed their tire tracks back to the main road and drove away from the desert, the haunting melody lingering in their minds. To this day, Sarah and David cannot explain what they experienced in the Arizona desert. Was it a shared hallucination, a mirage, or something more inexplicable? They are left with an enduring sense of unease, forever haunted by the memory of the desert dilemma and the mysterious, enchanting piano in the sand.